This season of So You Want to Run a Restaurant is brought to you by Localizer.
In today's market, the difference between a full house and an empty one is discoverability. And Localizer makes sure your restaurant actually gets found.
Yeah, by making it easy to manage all your online reviews, you'll boost your ranking on Google, Yelp, and even the top delivery apps. And more visibility means more customers walking through your door.
Turn your great reputation into real growth. And as an added bonus, listeners of this show get a 25% off discount on your first 3 months.
Learn how at localizer.com/podcast. That's LOCALYSER.com/podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Sarek.
And I'm Spencer Michael.
And this is So You Want to Run a Restaurant, created by the team at backofhouse.io, the most trusted resource for restaurant tech.
So today's episode isn't about running a restaurant. It's about rebuilding one from the ground up after some unfortunate and very tragic events that happened.
Yes, so we are talking to Bridget Foy in Philadelphia today. Bridget is the third generation behind one of Philadelphia's most iconic restaurants. It's a real staple in the community. She literally grew up at the corner of 2nd and South Street, which is right in the heart, if you're unfamiliar with the city, greeting guests, bussing tables, learning the heartbeat of the business.
But then in 2017, a devastating fire destroyed it all. So now, after that, the community came together to help out, to crowdfund, and of course, there's those insurance involved to be able to rebuild. But just when she got that rebuild going and nearly complete, the pandemic hit. But Bridget still didn't back down. She reimagined, she redesigned, and then reopened, preserving her family's legacy and then creating something actually entirely new on top of it. So I'm really excited to hear her story today.
Yeah, me too. Bridget, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
So your story is so much more than the food. And that's not to say that we don't love the food. But when I read up on you, I felt like the backbone of your story was really about resilience and identity and a long, long history with your local community. Because even though your name is on the front of the building, it seems like it's really been woven into the fabric of South Street for decades. And so you've lived in this restaurant through its highest highs and its most difficult moments, which I know we're going to talk about. So I love starting off the show with something that people don't always see. So what's one of the biggest challenges or lessons that you've learned on your journey that's really shaped who you are as a business owner today?
Well, this restaurant initially started in 1978.
Mm-hmm.
My father opened it, under the guise of more of like, a bar, sports pub. And when he wanted to shift it into a restaurant, he changed the name over and named it after me. So I feel like I sort of was really born into the business here. And
Almost literally. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I said, the time came that I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, well, of course I'm going to run the restaurant. And my parents were like, don't do it. What else do you like? Is there something else you like?
Yeah.
I was like, no, I love the restaurant business. So yeah, at a very young age, I was kind of introduced to the business, and I got hooked on it really young. So, I always, from I think I was 7 years old, I started working as a hostess and done every job in the business. But certainly throughout the years, I think one thing about owning a restaurant is you continually have to adapt and grow and change the way you do things and be able to do things on the fly. So back to whatever your regular question was. Yeah, so there's many challenges that we have overcome throughout the years, but we're still doing it 40 some years later.
Yeah. Tell us more about what was it like growing up in that restaurant and becoming part of the city's cultural fabric.
Yeah. So Philadelphia has really grown its food scene, tremendously in the past maybe 20 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
But as in any city, there were less restaurants, and so the restaurant population became a little denser, as the years went on and more people became interested in the business. But South Street in Philadelphia, if you're not familiar with it, was really kind of known for kind of being an eclectic shopping street. Punk rock stores, record stores, just a very diverse, business district. And that has really changed throughout the years. And as the restaurant has as well, we really have become like a neighborhood staple. We're situated between two great neighborhoods here in Philadelphia, Queen Village and Society Hill. So we've really become like the Cheers of the neighborhood, where people can come in and they always know somebody and they can always, strike up a conversation and meet somebody new
Yeah.
in the neighborhood. Um, so growing up there, was a lot of fun because the regulars were like family. Like I remember I would go in and after school they would put me in, a booth with this older woman like Jean Williams, and she ended up, my parents had to work. They were two working parents, so the woman would take me to go see like Broadway plays, take me to New York for the day. She kind of became like an aunt to me. Really, definitely a sense of family and
Yeah.
community.
You literally grew up in the restaurant. Essentially, it
Oh yeah,
takes a village, and you had your own kind of small village within the little restaurant area there. That's
yes,
incredible.
yeah.
I I am I have a similar past because I grew up in the restaurant business as well, and it's funny you say that because I had the exact same conversation with my parents about, hey, maybe I want to run a restaurant one day, and they're like, think again, kid, that's insanity. And
I was
the
going to
restaurant.
ask you that, Spencer. Did your
The,
parents have the same reaction?
Very
Apparently,
much so,
yes.
yeah, and but the restaurant business keeps calling us back, right? You tend to you can't get over it. At least I never could. It continues to call me back, but it is intense. It's long hours. You're working when everyone else is playing, evenings, weekends, holidays. You're at the restaurant. So now that you're going through all that on your own, what are you trying to keep the same as your parents ran, and what are you trying to change? What are you trying to put your own mark on, but also have that similar background and keeping the restaurant the same?
Right. So, I've grown, as a business operator because I have a second location. That's a different concept, but they are just one block away from another. We still want to keep that sense of community and neighborhood. And I think one thing my parents were really great at is the staff and making sure that the staff like really felt like, they were part of a family. And sometimes the staff of a restaurant can be kind of a band of misfits that get put together, and people that you wouldn't likely pair as friends end up becoming, coworkers that become lifelong friends. So that's definitely something, we want to keep within the business. But times go on, I think we have to grow more in like technology, and just
Right.
like social media. And, you didn't used to have to like record a TikTok reel to get guests to come in. So definitely have to keep up with current trends.
Right. Now everyone's trying to go viral, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's hoping for that viral moment. So you take over the restaurant, and I want to talk now about what happens with the fire in 2017. So in 2017, it was a really devastating moment for the business, and a fire destroyed the restaurant. And I can't even imagine, not just for the business, but for your community and for your family, how tough that must have been. So what do you remember from those few days? Technology decisions can make or break a restaurant. That's why restaurants turn to Back of House, your guide to smarter tech strategy. From point-of-sale systems to online ordering, labor tools, and guest engagement platforms, Back of House helps you cut through the noise with expert insights, comparisons, and best practices. Don't just buy tech, build a strategy that grows your business. Visit backofhouse.io and get the clarity you need to choose the right tools for your restaurant.
Pretty intense because that sometimes a restaurant becomes like almost like a person, right? They're kind of like they're living and breathing. They're like a family member as well, though it's a business. So it really felt like, kind of a sense of loss and shock and all those things, like grief that you might experience after losing a loved one. But we were supposed to have a Halloween party with a local DJ, Robert Drake, who's pretty well known. We live close to a historic open air market, and the community was like, well, let's still have the party. And so we had a Halloween party, and I think close to like 1,000 people showed up for an
Oh, awesome.
impromptu Halloween, and we made it a fundraiser for our staff since people were, we had a really great turnout for that. And it was awesome because like our beer vendors donated beer, and other restaurants came out and cooked. And so it was just really, really touching to see such an outpouring of like love and support for the business. And I think at that moment we were like, okay, we have to rebuild.
Yeah. Well, and you not only rebuilt Bridget Foy's, but that's also when you launched the pasta concept as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we were sort of like, "Oh, we don't have a job anymore. What are we gonna do?" And we realized that this was gonna take a while
Yeah.
to rebuild. And so we were like, one thing we always wanted to see in the neighborhood, we were like, I think this would be great. Like, I think this is something that's really missing and would hit. And it was a casual pasta Italian restaurant. Now I'm not Italian. I'm Irish. So we didn't want it to feel super, traditional Italian, and we wanted to be able to play like fun music and it'd be more of a fun atmosphere. So the name of the place is Crybaby Pasta, and that really took off. Like people really responded well to the name and the vibe of the place, and we're still doing really well here about 6 years later.
But it was right after you opened, so the community comes together, which is incredible, and you've got this beautiful place where it's like Cheers, where people gather. It's like their family, and you open a second one, and then the pandemic hits, and not only obviously it's a hit to the business, but also now that gathering spot can no longer happen. Everyone has to stay away. So I mean, so it's not only from a business perspective, but also an emotional and kind of family perspective. It must have hit hard.
Yeah. I mean, I remember like there was a time where the South Street Festival was another big event that happened, and our building was, at that point it was just really like a dirt pile. And my kids were young and they ended up like they're playing in the rubble of the restaurant in the dirt pile, and like all their friends from school were there. And so everyone was just really, it was awesome to see that.
Nice. And I think when I look at your history, because you were so ingrained in the operations of the restaurant from the 80s to now, and you saw your parents run it 80s to the 2000s, and you've taken it over. Is there a couple, and you mentioned things like social media and the technology. Is there a couple things from an operations perspective? Because our listeners, we get a lot of restaurant operators that listen, so they'd love to hear your perspective about what has changed. Is there something is it the attitudes of the staff is different? Is the cost of goods something that's changed quite a bit? Is there a couple things you really could pinpoint that's changed since like the early days to how you operate it now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing I will say that is remains the constant, right? Like you have to have good food and you want to have good service and you want to make people feel warm and hospitality. So like those are the things that are remained the same. And I think people really, when you make them feel good and they have that a great experience, that's like what really makes a restaurant special. But yeah, obviously, so many things have changed recently. Cost of goods is a big one. Staffing issues. Just we're constantly having to change there. And one thing that's changed is like hours of operation. We used to be a bar that stayed open till 2 a.m. Well, after the pandemic, that business really changed. Like the late nights became less of a part of what we were doing. People weren't, by 10 o'clock we were done. So that definitely has changed.
Interesting. I've
Yeah.
heard this from others as well, that it's more of a daytime, and I want to be in bed by 9 sort of
Yeah.
situation, as opposed to the late nights that maybe I'm used to.
And like we do a trivia night every Thursday and it's from 7 to 9. And people are like, oh, this is the trivia I go to because it ends at 9. And I don't want to be up, on a school night, so to speak, too late.
These responsible kids nowadays,
I know. Well, another thing is that
not my
people are drinking
experience, I
less.
tell you.
I mean, the younger generation of folks, you can see they're consuming less alcohol. Like we are definitely selling tons more of mocktail, non-alcoholic beverages. That was not a thing before. Aside from having just like juice and soda, you weren't having like crafted non-alcoholic cocktails.
Yeah. It seems like you're not the only one, though. I'm seeing that everywhere. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
in Chicago and we've got the mocktail menus are growing and growing. They're even, some of the pubs around here even have NA Guinness on tap as
Oh,
an
yeah.
option, which I love NA Guinness myself. So I think
Pretty good.
it is pretty good. I feel like a lot of these beer brands have really cracked the code. But it sounds like one of the things that you continue to do is you're continuing to evolve as, as the times change, as audiences change, as these restaurant concepts continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to kind of stay current. When you're not the new kid on the block, you're not getting the publicity. You're not like the number one in People always want to go to try the new restaurant, right? Like, hey, have you been? Have you been? So how do you keep people, coming back
Right.
year after year? And, how do you get your current guests, and how do you get new guests when you're
Right.
not a new kid?
Well, I read a quote of you and you said, I didn't want to lose the soul of what we had, but I also wanted to give the neighborhood something new when you were launching the Crybaby Pasta. And I guess my question is, how have you continued to strike that balance? Because not just physically, but in terms of the experience that your guests are having, because your restaurants are really a staple in the community.
I think one thing, we do is we use Resi as our reservation
Hmm.
platform. And so we really try to like encourage like servers and everyone to take notes. Like when a guest comes in, did they love, this certain wine? Did they really enjoy this pasta? Um, is there take the name of their kids or their dog? Like if they sat outside with their dog and we say, the dog's name was Mickey. Then we come back and we're like, hey, how was Mickey doing?
Yeah.
People love when you can like remember stuff about them, especially, people love to talk about their kids and they love to talk about their pets. So I think when you kind of like really lean in and like get to know people and put some of those notes in, so it's almost like a cheat sheet when they come in.
Hmm.
And this goes across both restaurants, that you can see those little like notes of hospitality. Hey, this person is gluten free, or they're like, there's some allergies. So like before a server had to say, do you have any allergies? They're coming over and they're like, hey, I know that you're gluten free. So, here are some options for you.
Yeah, it sounds like you've tried to maintain that personalization with you and your guests, which
Right.
I think that goes really far. People feel like, oh, they know me, and you want to go and support the people that you know, that you feel like are your friends and your family and are really in your community. So it makes sense that you've seen so much success with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think hospitality goes a long way.
So, how would you say that your leadership style maybe has evolved through all of the crises that you've been through and growing up in this business? And what kind of culture are you working to build with your team? And not just the personalization, but maybe their own personal growth in the food service space.
I think, as I was a young manager, it was really hard to be open and direct with people. That you kind of like, you become buddy buddy with them and you're like, you feel uncomfortable, kind of like, hey, this is not working. So I think it's really important that maybe from the get go, from day one, that you were saying to people, hey, here's a list of our expectations and goals. Like here's a manual, but I'm gonna like go over with you and say like, here, this is why we're doing this step. Like not just like, okay, this is how we do it, but this is why we're doing it. Um, and just like becoming kind of more organized with that. And we're obviously not a corporate setting, but some of those things are really good to have, like those standards of service, to have kind of like a direct approach to that, because without it, it can be, it's harder to keep on track.
It's interesting how there's so many SOPs, there's so many different ways of operating. There's things that you need to have in place that but you can't sacrifice kind of the soul of the restaurant, especially when you're working as independent. But when often patrons come in, they feel that, oh, this is just how things flow and it's natural. And this is just, you just open the doors and things happen. There's a ton of steps that you need to go through too. So are you constantly wrestling with, okay, this is a neighborhood spot, but we have to operate with a lot of standards in place, and so there are rules that need to be adjourned to. But I get what you mean about staff's family, and you need to sort of massage that in a way. So is that always wrestling in your head about how I maintain this homey place with also maintaining these standards and steps of service?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that has been great for me is like I've grown, is that I have managers in place, and sometimes I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna let them
Hmm.
take the lead on it, and like maybe it's good cop, bad cop. Maybe like this manager needs to go in and say, hey, this needs to be done this way. Like I noticed it, but I'm like, hey, let's make sure that we're kind of like staying on top of these things.
I mean,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
and
Allowing them to lead.
Yes.
it's handing over control sometimes when you've been there for such a long time. Your name is literally on every part of the building.
Right.
And to hand over to control, like I'm going to let someone else dictate how this is about to go. Yeah, I can imagine that is difficult.
Yeah. Well, it's nice because you're like, okay, I don't have to be the bad guy.
Yeah, someone else could do that for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you ever thought about expanding or, I mean, outside of the crybaby pasta, or is the legacy of this space, I'm assuming it makes it hard to kind of replicate anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I would be very interested in an opportunity to expand.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's challenging. I think what I've noticed is like it's hard to go. So from 1 to 2 restaurants was easy, but now how do you go from like 2 to 3 to more? So, I haven't cracked that quite yet, but there's time.
Is there something unique about Philadelphia restaurants? Is there something different about the Philadelphia restaurants that I'm going to find that I'm not going to find in New York or Chicago or Miami or Los Angeles? Is something that you can pinpoint about I'm going to Philadelphia and it's going to be a bit of a different experience?
I think it's a pretty tight knit group of folks in the restaurant scene. Like we have, good collaboration between like operators. In our neighborhood, we've really collaborated a lot with people to do like special events. Like, for example, we just did a pickleball tournament where we took
All the rage, that pickleball.
yeah. We worked with Botanist Gin, who's the official sponsor of pickleball, and we set up 4 pickleball courts in what typically is a parking area in the city. And, other restaurants and businesses came in and participated in the event. Some people came and played, some people set up booths. So I think just like having that great sense of collaboration is great in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's also a great lesson for other people that might be listening too. Some of those collaborations that you might not have thought of before. How do you expand your engagement with the community in other ways, like the local gym or sports complex or whatever
Right.
that may be?
Yeah, so I mean, like when we had this event, we had I think 3 different gyms, and like a stretch person was there. And once you kind of like, hey, um, you give them maybe a food and a beverage, and then all of a sudden you're getting a complimentary this. So just like creating kind of bonds within your neighboring community.
Yeah. I think that's also kind of indicative of the rise of these third spaces as well that we're seeing, where restaurants are they're part of it, but then there's all these other experiences that are attached into it. And it's again becoming this place for community to come together in person. A lot of people have searched for that post COVID,
Right.
and trying to find more of that in person interaction, which it feels like you have a ton of that going on.
Yeah, we have a lot of that going on, and it's like as we see the shift and more of these like quick serve operations are becoming so popular, they're like a less personalized experience, but they're extremely popular right now. Sometimes there's like I see concern for our group, which is like the casual restaurant, just like that space just seems to be kind of a hard one to get your operating costs right and all that. So
Yeah, you're constantly wrestling with that. A quick serve, your labor costs are always going to be lower. And you're not having that family feel where like, well, these are long-term employees, so you need to take care of them. It's less so when you're running kind of a counter service. So I totally get that. And it must be difficult to try and navigate those waters of just like your labor costs might be a little spiked, might be higher, but
Right.
I definitely hear from other restaurant operators like that's what makes my place special. Sure, my labor's higher, but I pay them more and I trust them, and that flows through the food and through the operations, and I end up making more profit off of that because I just know that everything's going to be taken care of. Is similar
Right.
in Bridget Foy's?
Yeah, I would agree with that. So yeah, I mean sometimes I look at, like for example, a Caesar salad, which, everyone has them, and it's like, gosh, wow, are we charging $13, $15 for a Caesar? And it's like in my mind, sometimes you're like, gosh, that might seem high. But it's really just like what you have to cost things at to make it work.
Yeah. We could get into the weeds on restaurant on food cost and labor cost here, Bridget, but just I could just hear people's clicking off of the podcast. So.
Yeah, please, Spencer, don't mess with our download rates.
Exactly.
Please, our downloads are high right now. Yeah, I'm going to close us out with one final question, Bridget. So this is kind of a fun one. What's one dish that's been on the menu from the early days and it still is there and it still sparks joy when it comes out of the kitchen? Or recipes, maybe a recipe that has never changed since day one that the community still loves?
Yeah. So for us, still like the number one seller for years has been a burger, and people just like absolutely
Classic.
people love burgers, and it's gone through a lot of iterations, but at this time it's really just like the classic cheeseburger, still the number one seller. Yeah,
Well,
Perfect.
years you can do all these other things, but people love a great burger.
I do too. I am
Yeah.
probably one of the number one purchasers of a burger
yeah.
at a restaurant because I always want to try everybody's burgers to figure out which is really the best one, you know?
Yeah.
I'm a fan of that. Sometimes you got to get like the basics and do it right and do it really, really well. And it
Right.
shows.
Yeah,
It
for
shows.
sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Bridget. I really appreciate hearing your story, and I am rooting for the continued success of your restaurant in Philly.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So You Want to Run a Restaurant is created by Back of House, produced and hosted by Claudia Sarek, with Nick Florick as executive producer. Marketing by Hillary Young and Ashley Dunn. Creative by Manisha Kishinchan. And live production by Sarah Heemstra. And of course me, your co-host, Spencer Michael. For more information, visit backofhouse.io/podcast.